Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to explore the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this. So I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report. I am Rion Charles. As the government of Grenada readies its administrative mechanisms to treat the quasi-permanent state of contract workers in the service, we deeply dive into how the regularization framework will be implemented for these employees. Permanent Secretary Lindonna Hilaire Marshall articulated the framework at a recent press conference.
It's a complex exercise, so we need to do it systematically. So the decision was taken for us to approach the regularization on 3 phases. The first phase, we would look at persons in acting, temporary, on assignment, and probationary status on the establishment. And as we mentioned, that process has already started, and we are optimistic by the end of December 2023, we should complete the first phase of the regularization exercise. The second phase, which would look at persons holding PSC contract, contract of service, daily paid, and persons holding ministry letters. That phase we trust we would be able to advance through in 2024. And then we're going to be in a position to start looking at the third phase, which would look at people who are holding contracts for service, as well as the Imani trainees. But to support the second and third phase, we recognize that we need to do it with empirical data. We cannot just sit at our desk and make decisions as to how we're going to regularize those persons.
However, the public sector trade union that represents most casual employees has expressed concern that consultations with the Department of Public Administration have been superficial and also expressed concerns about the scope of regularization, inter alia, effective dates of appointment for newly regularized workers, and the methodology to be used to determine their new rank and scale in the service. Here's Daisy Hazard, Public Relations Officer of the Public Workers Union.
We do know what was said prior to the administration taking office, that it was going to be a stroke of a pen, that, it literally was going to be an overnight process. We are going to regularize everybody. But we have to admit that that cannot happen. We understand the public service. We understand how workers are employed. And we know that it cannot happen at the stroke of a pen. But while the process is being looked at and worked on over the phases that the DP and Prime Minister has outlined to the public, there should be some assurance to a worker that unless you have violated significantly the rules of the SRNO, unless you have so compromised your job function or position that you cannot be retained in the government service, no worker should have to wonder, am I going to get that letter today?
But first, the report will glimpse the 1261 Grenada Film Festival, now in its 5th year. The festival, which featured films produced and directed by Grenadian creatives and creatives from the global south, plans to shore up the well of talented Grenadian creatives in the film space this year. Being held under the theme From Small Seeds to Big Dreams. From 5 to 50, the festival intends to pay tribute to Grenada's journey towards its 50th year of independence, while showcasing its continued growth and impact. We welcome our guests. Mashaida Philip, Director of the 1261 Grenada Film Festival. Chester Humphrey, Labor Consultant and former Technical Allied Workers Union President. Dr. Curlin Gilchrist, Economist and Government Advisor. Lindonna Hilaire Marshall, Permanent Secretary in the Department of Public Administration. And Oliver Joseph, former Business Development Minister in the previous administration. Here is our host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, with this week's editorial titled Flim Flammers and False Prophets, the case of Cheryl Bartley. We thank you for joining us.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Now, on an island with a challenging healthcare system and tough economic challenges for some, claims of divine healing and miracles by duplicitous evangelical ministers can gain a captive audience. These men and women crave fame and notoriety. They love the sounds of people fawning at their every word as they prance and point and pontificate about their God-ordained abilities to heal the sick and cast out demons. Now, apparently in the case of Grenada, there may be thousands of said demons if we were to believe the fantastical claims of Apostle Cheryl Barnett, now under criminal indictment for allegedly causing the death of one of her adherents at a Birmingham pool, the location of her very popular life-changing ministries. The man was at the time being baptized by angels, apparently, if we were to also believe her fantastical claims that angels are the ones who conduct such rituals, which is a deviation from conventional adult baptisms practiced by conventional evangelical churches. But the Cheryl Barnett saga is not new. In fact, there are thousands of miracle pastors in developing countries who make bogus and absurd claims to demonstrate their divine anointment and supernatural powers. They in turn get their Christian devotees to believe that their counterintuitive declarations are actually direct revelations from God or forms of infallible prophetic verbiage. Now, it is also not surprising that charlatan pastors like Barnett will continue to have captive audiences in places like Grenada, where superstition abounds. Last week, it was the case of the black fowl seen on Grandad's Beach. A few weeks before that, it was the case of space debris that lit up the skies above Grenada and Trinidad and Tobago. And just after that, it was the case of the solar eclipse. In all of these instances, some Grenadians claimed that these were signs from God, divine signs, if you will, or signs of some impending doom, perhaps revelation. So while some have decried this self-declared pastor's antics It is clear that the marketplace of superstitious minds will continue to be a fertile ground for them to continue their fanciful and stage managed theatrics in the name of the God they serve. And at this time, I am happy to be joined by our first guest for this week's program, Mashida Phillip, who is joining us here to talk about the upcoming 12 degrees north, 61 degrees west film festival. Mashida, welcome to the Bub Report. I can't seem to hear you. Are you able to hear me? You may need to unmute your microphone there. Okay, it doesn't look like Mashida. I can hear Mashida. So what I'm going to do, I'll disconnect my headphones for a second here and see if we can. Can you hear me now? Okay, so Mashida can hear me. Folks, let us just take a quick break. We're going to see what's happening with the technical issues here. Stand by.
Hello everyone, I am Chantal McGuire, your local bred Grenadian actuary and asset liability management expert. Are you satisfied with your current finances? Are you curious and constantly looking for ways to make additional income? Join me on the Bub Report as we strive to empower you, our valued audience, to become more financially literate and help evolve Grenadians into a mindset that's investment focused and entrepreneurial. Literacy is about freedom. It's about being able to control your money and not letting your money control you. It's about foresight for a brighter future. Our core mission is to promote financial literacy and share money generating opportunities for everyone. Join us on the last Sunday of every month, starting July 30th, as we strive to provide the keys to financial freedom.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the program. Now we're going to see if we can get Mashida now. Mashida, let's see if I can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Happy
I can hear you
Sunday.
loud and clear. Happy Sunday to you. Welcome.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Apologies for that. Now, the film festival is in its fifth year, and it's expected to open with a gala night down there at, I believe, the Grenada Olympic Committee's Olympic House. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, talk to us at that gala night. You expected to also honor Grenadians who've made contributions in the areas of film. Talk to us about that gala night and how that would unfold.
First of all, thank you so much for this platform, and it's just such an honor that we're here, year 5. It feels like year 1, and this year, the theme from small seeds to big dreams is such a fitting theme to commensurate our 5th year anniversary. So we're doing things a little bit different. It's our 2nd year at post-COVID, and we are in the midst of celebrating Grenadian excellence in the film and television world, particularly the creative industry here in Grenada. So we have partnered with the Grenada Office of Creative Affairs, Digicel, the Olympic Committee, several other tech companies here in Grenada, who have all played an instrumental role in bringing this together to celebrate not just our creatives who are in front and behind the cameras, but people who have established a legacy here, developing the creative sector as well. So our opening night, which is October 24th, we start with a cocktail reception, and we move on to the section where we are honoring the Grenadians, and followed by a dinner, movie segment, and live entertainment after. So it's just going to be an evening of featuring a lot of our Grenadian talents, both from the music and film world.
So when you talk about the Grenadians you intend to honor, are we how far back are we going, or is that you don't want to let that cat out of the bag as yet?
Well, what we have done, the press release is actually coming out this week. We had partnered with the Office of Creative Affairs, and we had a public request for nomination, and we selected individuals, both young as well as fully established in the industry. One of the things that was really passionate for me is carrying on the legacy of my late uncle, Errol Maitland. So we have established an award in his name and in his honor. Basically, that will go to someone who has withstand the test of time in developing the industry and the entrepreneurial side of the Grenadian creative sector here. So yeah, I can't really say it yet because the press release is coming out tomorrow.
You are embargoed until I never knew you were related to Mr. Maitland.
Yes, he is my uncle. He was my uncle.
Absolutely. Well, perhaps that's why you have a passion for the creative arts. Now, in respect of the Office of Creative Affairs, now earlier this year we had the creative conference that was held in Grenada. Do you feel as if there was important follow-up from that office in terms of giving their commitment to the film industry in a very substantial way? You mentioned the Office of Creative Affairs, and it would appear as if there is some follow-up there.
The follow through is actually, in my opinion, from the creative sector on a whole. The mere fact that they have implemented some training courses with the TAMCC, so creatives can get to better skill themselves through entrepreneurship and also from the legal standpoint. The partnership with us, they've been very instrumental in getting some kind of connections, not just between the creative sector, but also the business sector to come on board and be part of the educational aspect of this. So what we have done this year is establish, because we're actually bridging tech and creativity this year. So we have bridged, we're having a creative immersive series in which we are featuring several Grenadians as well as international and regional experts who would be talking about things ranging from artificial intelligence, 360 marketing, cybersecurity, how do our kids remain safe online, and not just our kids. Us as Grenadians, we are also talking about VR. We're bringing in VR films to get our next generation and our creators right now adept to the different things that is happening, how times are changing, and how we can now monetize from a business standpoint as well. So this is focused and tailored towards both the business community as well as the creative sector. So this festival is not just a come watch movies, but it's a very immersive, interactive festival.
You mentioned VR, and that stood out to me because VR, or virtual reality, is one of the new elements of the evolution of tech that we're seeing. Are you saying that we're going to be seeing Grenadian culture, Grenadian heritage in that virtual reality space?
Well, we are working on it. Basically, our festival had partnered with organizations in Africa, so we're bringing content that is relatable to our community, so our younger generation can now experience and identify with content that looks like us, feel like us, and have the representation in this situation. And we are currently working on developing content for our 360 space for the Independence next year as well. So it's a work in progress. So very soon you will be seeing that.
that 360 space for independence, I'm really looking forward to that. Now, I'm
Mm-hmm.
also heartened. One of the elements of the film festival that I really appreciate is the fact that you partner with our brothers and sisters in the African diaspora, essentially our ancestral homeland. Talk
Mm-hmm.
to us about what are some of the highlights that would be coming from the motherland this year as part of the festival.
The highlight is coming. We have a long-standing relationship with Vortex. They are an animation company based in Nigeria, and they have an initiative called Animate Africa. And in year one, in 2019, the first film that was awarded, the first animation film that was awarded, came from that pack right there. So part of our long-term initiative was trying to foster relationships that our next generation of animators, of content creators, can have the opportunity to network and interact with different companies, both locally here in the region and in Africa. So those are some of the things that we have provided. Coming from that, our children's program will be fused by animation from their Animate Africa initiative, plus some additional animations from the region as well as North America. The VR technology, as I mentioned before, the films, that is also coming from Africa, from Kenya. They are going to be doing a virtual reality talkback as well. So we're having that kind of immersive interaction with them. A big part of what we are trying to do is have cross our intersectionality training later on in the upcoming months. So some of our animators can either do internships with them out there remotely here in Grenada and trying to bridge the gap in that way. So I'm currently working with Coding Academy, who is also going to be part of the digital space because they're doing amazing things here from gaming to animation. So it's just bridging the communities to provide more opportunities for our creators here. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah. And now let us talk about the films that would be, of course, without giving anything away, but of course, a lot of that is also on the website.
Yes.
What are you excited about? What particular film are you most excited about?
Actually, personally, I am actually excited about what you have up here. Tencent Daisy. This is done by Cheryl. It was written actually by Cheryl Latouche. She is a Grenadian screenwriter, and she's also the executive producer of that film. The film spoke about our folklore, the Little Mermaid, and just to see how she was able to repurpose this story in North America, it was so amazing to me. And I am really looking forward to that. Cheryl is going to be present here in Grenada as well. So it's an opportunity for aspiring writers, aspiring creatives to come out and network with her. She's going to be live in person. So I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. And that would be that's happening on the Grenada Night.
Yes.
It's dubbed the Grenada Night. So is that the only film for the Grenada Night, or do you have other films as well?
We have Cheryl, and we have also Fearless, which is part of the Grenada Night. One of the subjects who is featured in Fearless actually is Grenadian, and her family will be here after 35 years coming back to Grenada. So the festival is the reason why it gives them a momentum to actually come back to Grenada after 35 years. And it is such an honor for us to be having this platform and be able to have a space that persons in the diaspora can come back and indulge with our community and reconnect with our community here in Grenada as well. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us look at the other films. I mean, you have, of course, you mentioned Fearless, Tencent, Daisy. There is a feature on Roy Cape, who is a Caribbean musical icon. He's a cultural legend. Yeah.
Yes.
Paradise
and he's also Grenadian.
Oh, he has Grenadian roots. I never knew
He
that.
has
Thank you for
Grenadian
that.
roots. Yes, yes,
Okay, very well.
yes.
We also have Tabanka in the Melee. I would want to see that.
So it's two films actually. This one here is a film block. It is Tabanka, which is a short film, and then In the Melee, actually, it's a film it's a documentary that was created, inspired by Marshall Montano's festival post-COVID. It was his first festival. I think it was in Mexico or Brazil or somewhere it was, but they created a documentary about this. And I think it's such a fitting film. It would inspire our Grenadian creatives to repurpose a lot of the activities that is happening here. So all of these films that you're seeing here, we're encouraging all of the music producers, content creators, come and be inspired. Look at different ways in which what you are capturing here in Grenada can be repurposed into documentary films, into fiction films. And hopefully next year, we will have more content from Grenada that can be premiered at the 2024 installation of the 1261 Film Festival.
Absolutely. This looks very interactive. I really like the interactive format of this year's festival because, young creatives, aspiring creatives can get an opportunity to learn from others in respect of different aspects of film by way of the masterclass that you're holding. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to cover? Of course,
Yes.
the festival would not be possible without community and corporate support. So let us
That's
talk about
right.
people who have been supporting the festival. But before that, you want to add something else?
Yeah, before that, I want the general public to be aware of our first Youth and Tech Festival. This is one day, and it is a day celebrating youth creativity. So basically, we have partnered with several different creative organizations here who will be providing things. Oh, the students from CAMCC actually will be showcasing their robotics. We have face painting, we have movie screenings, we have dance, like a dance little showcase. We have live entertainment. Zion, which is Pinky Fabulous's daughter, beautiful daughter, she will be our ambassador for the Youth Fest. And this is a day that is just celebrating youth creativity, exposing them to possibilities within the creative industry. That is taking place on Saturday, October 28th. And this is our first installment. And we're asking parents to bring your children out there, get them exposed to different avenues and different areas in the creative industry. So that is something that I am really looking forward to, Kellan, and I really hope that parents take advantage of this.
Absolutely. Now let us talk about who is helping you to make this possible.
So my team members. So you have Nelko, you have Siobhan, Michelle, we have Justin, we have Kara, who is in the back end with social media. We have Nenji. There are several different, we have a whole accolades of people helping us, team members. As far as sponsors is concerned, we have to say thank you to the GTA. We have to say thank you to the Office of Creative Affairs as well, DigiSound, and all of the tech companies that is coming on board, both locally and in the diaspora, that is making this possible. We encourage people to come out for our opening gala night, and it's a fundraising event. So for corporations, we have tables, and we're encouraging the corporates to come out and support us in that initiative as well.
And tickets, where can patrons get tickets?
Tickets are on GoToFest. So for the gala night, for the general public, it is $75 US for that opportunity. For corporates, we have different packages, which is also transparent and listed on our website. For the screenings, we have both day passes and single passes, so they can get access to that on GoToFest. And for the Youth Film and Tech Day, or festival, I should say, that is also there. It's $10 easy for children and $20 for adults. So it is going to be a very interactive time, and we have live performances by different musical artists here. So looking forward to people coming out and socializing with us.
Absolutely. Ms. Shida, thank you so much and all the very best on the upcoming festival.
Yes, and I'm waiting on your submissions. Hopefully next year. I was promised one
Yes,
from you this year.
it was. Yes. But it's one thing that I assure you I will be submitting to the
Yes.
festival. It may not be
And
next year because currently I'm working on completing my first book. So
okay.
that's taking a lot of time, but certainly
Yes.
it's something I plan on doing. All right, Ms. Shida, thank you
Um,
for appearing on this week's edition of the Bub Report.
Thank you for the opportunity for
Abs-
letting people know what is happening here in Grenada.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Ms. Shida Phillip, one of the directors of the upcoming 1261 Film Festival that's taking place in Grenada shortly. So, what we will do now, viewers and listeners, we are going to take a quick break and come back with the panel segment of the week. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
The numbers in the public service, the establishment is fixed, Mr. Speaker. And we have to agree to that. The over $100 million at soft loans that we're getting, we would not have got a cent if we did not agree to basic decisions that will in fact enhance the medium-term and long-term economic benefit of the country. Put all nurses on the permanent. Put all, everybody, just put them, because you're wicked if you don't do it. Yes, go in government. Go into government and do that and find out who's going to support you. Go, then you will find out and they'll say, I didn't understand and I did not know.
Because we must accept, as Pierce indicated, the government isn't going to simply be able to employ every person. We have to be practical. We have to make sure that our productivity is also, and our customer service is also significantly improved. Because as I said at the forum yesterday, if we perhaps do a survey of ourselves and ask the public what they think of our service levels, I kind of have the feeling I know the answer, and I'm not so sure it will be a positive one. So I think we also owe it to the public to ensure that we raise our productivity, we raise our service standards, to make sure that internally we are happy an optimistic group, but that also externally people view us in a happy and optimistic way, and that they want to actually come to the public service to get the service that they deserve.
Viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. As a programming note, we will be joined by Mr. Colin Gilchrist later in the program. But Mr. Chester Humphrey indicated that he will not be able to join us. We got a call from him this morning indicating that he had some personal emergency that he has to deal with, and so we will not have him here today. But the show must go on, and so we're happy to be joined today by Mrs. Lindona Hilaire Marshall, who is the permanent secretary in the Department of Public Administration in the government of Grenada, and Mr. Oliver Joseph, who actually served as a permanent secretary and as a technocrat in the government of Grenada, who also has an understanding of issues of regularization, and that is before he got into active frontline politics. So we're going to have a conversation around regularization and to do follow-ups in respect of a press conference that Mrs. Marshall and the Prime Minister held in St. George's around what the regularization framework would look like. Mr. Joseph and Ms. Marshall, welcome to this morning's edition of the Bub Report. Mr. Joseph, if you can turn your camera on, sir, so that our viewers can see you. There you are. There you are. It's always good to have technocrats on the program because you are able to distill some of those complicated and confusing concepts to our viewers and listeners. But I want to contextualize this morning's conversation with a quote from the International Monetary Fund. And I believe it's important for us to set up regularization against a particular economic backdrop. Now, in 2016, the IMF said, actually this was in 2019, the IMF said, quote, in a report, notwithstanding worsening fiscal situations, governments have found it challenging to use downsizing as an option of adjustment because, one, they consider the social distress and dislocation caused by enforced redundancies politically unacceptable in societies with high double-digit unemployment rates and lacking adequate social safety nets, of concerns that retrenchments would have negative consequences for the retail, financial, and other sectors of the economy. Now, in respect of Grenada, this is what the IMF report said. It said the sustainable way forward will largely depend on successes in addressing the political economy issues and getting consensus from labor unions, the private sector, and civil society. And here they're talking about regularization issues. Now, Ms. Marshall, it would appear as if the IMF has always expressed a positive reviews in respect of how Grenada thinks about the regularization framework. So it would appear as if we would be on a positive path in that respect, in setting the tone. Ms. Marshall, are you there?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yes, are you hearing me? Yeah,
yes,
did you hear that question? Yes.
I didn't take it as a question.
Okay, so the question I'm asking is, do you believe that the tone we are setting for regularization, as articulated by the IMF, is a positive tone?
It sounds positive to me, yes.
Absolutely. Mr. Joseph, if you can just unmute your mic there.
Good morning to all your viewers, listeners, and thank you very much for the invitation. But yes. I think in order to put regularization in context, we have to go back to 1984. Recall the period 79 to 83, where the constitution was suspended. And when it was restored and the democratically elected government came into office in 84, several countries came forward for assistance, the British, the Canadian, to look at the public service and to deal with regularization. And between the period, the first NNP period of Robert Blaze, 84 to 90, there was a retrenchment program to reduce the size of the public service. So we had that context first, retrenchment, where several hundreds of the public servants were sent home, or state employees were sent home in order to reduce the public service. And then the NDC came in between 90 and 95, and they continued with regularization and managing the public service. Then you had NNP under Dr. Mitchell coming in after. And the challenge for every government has always been the optimal level of, what is the optimal level that you need to have in the public service? Because Grenada is a small island economy, the private sector is not robust enough to create the employment that we need. And so you find the majority of school leavers turn to the government for a job. They want a job with the government. And therefore, every government faces that challenge. How do we create employment in the public service? Because you create employment in the public service, that increases the wage bill. And as you increase the wage bill as a percentage of your total revenue, it means that you will have less revenue to spend on other areas. And different formulation came forward. I think Grenada is perhaps one of the most studied public service, because from my 30 years, 27 years in the Grenada public service and 3 years as a regional civil servant, Grenada is the most studied public service, I think. There are loads and loads of report there. Now I'm here to talk about having a next study again, but you have all the studies there. They are there. CARICAD, the Caribbean Center for Development Administration, was one of the last organizations to come into study. They did a functional review. They look at the numbers that we need to have, and it's there. But because we have this challenge faced by every government, how do we create jobs in the absence of a private sector that is not creating jobs? So we have taken on the initiative to say, listen, one of the reasons for going into the CBI program was to attract investors into the tourism sector, where a large amount of people can be employed, because government cannot continue to employ them. And that was one of the reasons for going into the sector. And one of the reasons tourism was targeted, because we do not have the room stock. And so we said, let us give incentive. So all these things will get at helping the private sector. In a lot of other areas, incentives were given to the private sector so they can create a job that will ease the government. So that is the context in which we have to see regularization.
And let me bring in Mrs. Marshall again. Now, Mrs. Marshall, in your press conference, and first of all, I must compliment you for having such an excellent visual presentation. As someone who is in the world of visuals, I was very impressed by the very detailed visual context of your presentation. But let us talk about the first phase. Now, it would appear as if there are no challenges in the first phase of the regularization, which began to roll out in this month of October and is expected to continue at the end of the year. Now, what might be challenging, however, for the unions, as the unions have articulated, is the determination of the dates of appointment for the workers who will be regularized. How will that be fleshed out?
Thank you again, and pleasant good morning to our viewers.
Yes.
And to Mr. Joseph, good morning, good to see you. Okay, so when we think regularization of the public officers, and we see, as we articulated, it's in 3 phases. The first phase, we are thinking about all the possible conditions that can arise to affect what we do. So, of course, the appointment dates is something that we are cognizant of. And when we think of appointment dates, we have to break it down into context. So we're speaking about persons who are on probation. We're speaking about people who are temporary. And these are the 2 main players here. And when we speak in terms of the appointment dates and how it's going to affect them. Because when we think about officers in terms of their pension, appointment dates have a significant factor to play in the pension calculation. So we do know that your first date of appointment, as well as where you are in terms of your scale on retirement, are factors that need to be considered when you are retiring from the publics for your pension. So we are mindful of that, and we are certainly looking at what the rules say with regards to probation. So persons who are on probation, we know your letter would have told you from what point to what point. So we are going to consider what the public service rules speaks to with regards to probationary appointments. However, with regards to temporary appointments, we are looking at it in terms of the cost. And we know cost is not the only implication. And yes, we're saying we also considering for persons who are temporary, the appointment dates and how it can affect their pension. So yes, we know if we think about appointing persons all the way back, it's going to have serious cost implications for the government. So the thinking is we are going to appoint persons current, ensuring that those persons' movement in the scale is considered. So on the current appointment, they're going to be receiving the salaries that they are due as of now. But we may not be able to go back all the years to pay the retroactive given the cost. But we are also saying, understanding that that has implication for the pension, we are looking to compromise and join those services so that those persons' date will be considered in the calculation for the pension.
Okay.
So
Now, before, yes. Go ahead.
So
Now,
thing, we really have to look at it from all sides.
Absolutely. Now, before phase two, which I understand would be much more nuanced and would involve a lot of, shall we say, foundation work. Yes, concern has also been raised that workers are currently being attritioned, and some of them are worried that they may not make the cut when you get to that second phase. Now, how is the DPA determining which workers are to be let go and which workers are to remain?
DPA never spoke to letting go anybody.
Well, that was a concern that the union expressed.
Okay, so well, I can, from the DPA's perspective,
yes,
our intent is to improve the public service. And as we mentioned, we're moving in phases. So to support the second phase, we need to know what the public service actually looks like today. We have mentioned about functional reviews being done prior. We understand that, but we have to be mindful that reviews are done for a period. So we cannot use the reports from 2016 or 2014 to inform decisions in 2023. Things have significantly changed. And we do have a challenge in the public service with records keeping. So we may have piece of the data here, piece of the data there, and we cannot substantiate which is actually the correct thing. So in order for us to make informed decisions, we certainly have to know what the true picture looks like. To do that, we need to find out the information. To find out the information, we need to do the review. And so we are back out. Yes, we attempted to do a desk review, trying to look at all the reports that existed, but that doesn't give us a true picture of what is currently on the ground. So we need to find out what is really we faced with so that we can make the decisions based on what we have before us. So hence we believe the functional review exercise is critical.
Absolutely. Mr. Joseph, let me bring you back in here. The way that Mrs. Marshall and the team at the DPA articulated the rollout of this review, as someone who worked in the public service, how would you assess the rollout, Mr. Joseph?
The phased approach is the correct approach. The phase one, for example, is where you appointing people temporary, the temporary appointment, trying to get them permanent, see what vacancies there and try to fill it, and so on. That's the simpler one, the first three. But you see, Ms. Marshall is a civil servant, so she cannot deal with the political issues.
Yeah.
Because the government finds itself in a real conundrum. It promised permanent employment, one civil service, where everybody will be made permanent.
And in which they also said contract work is illegal.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
So you see, that is the conundrum they find themselves in. So they have to find a way out, to deal with it, because now the reality is coming home. That is not as simple as making people permanent. And therefore, this functional review. What I'm saying, if a report, I'm not talking about a report that is 10 years old. I don't expect DPA to use it. I'm talking about a report that was done in 2020. we did functional review in the past from external consultants. Then we had job analysis being done, external consultants, a lot of money, millions of dollars have been spent. And so that should put, and recently, during our time, we started the regularization of over 200 and something teachers and regularize some of the nurses. And we said that process of regularization will continue. So it is good that to see the government is attempting to address this matter, but for the workers who are there all these years, they were given hope that when they made prominent, it will be retroactive. In other words, from the time they started in that position. Now we are hearing, well, it will be too costly. We will join your service, but the effective date of your new employment will have to be current. You see, there are a lot of nuances. This is not a straightforward matter as when you're campaigning and making all these promises.
In other words, not with the stroke of a pen.
Exactly. Well, that takes a lot of work. And besides the cost, you have to find the optimum number of people in the public service given our population size. And you see, government alone, government is the largest single employer, right?
Correct.
Right. So government alone employs about 7% of the population. But you don't judge employment and population is on the workforce. So government alone employs about 15% of the workforce. As I said, the reason for that is simple, that the private sector is not providing the jobs. And therefore, the government always have to think about how jobs can be provided to provide the services. And then you have the issue of productivity that we need to address seriously. The last report on productivity did not give Grenada a good ranking at all. And so we need to address productivity in the public service. And we need to address certain sectors and give them greater attention. For example, the Ministry of Health need greater attention than other ministries, because that's life you're dealing with, and people quality of life and the health is of paramount importance. So you have to consider how you will treat with health, the health sector, in order to provide the sort of services that people want. So this exercise that the DPA is undertaking as the technical arm of government, Ms. Marshall did a very good presentation, but that is what Ms. Marshall's role is as a technical person.
As a technocrat, yes. Absolutely.
She did a good job as a technocrat. It'd be good to have a minister and your program to explain the promises that were made.
That would be the prime minister, and which we did ask him about that, but we intended to bring him back.
He's the minister of the public
service. He's a line minister, correct? He's a line minister.
As he's the line minister, you might have to ask him the political questions.
Absolutely.
And all the promises that were made. Ms. Marshall you can ask Ms.
No,
Marshall.
Ms. Marshall can't answer that. I'm very aware of Mrs. Marshall's role here as a permanent secretary. But Mrs. Marshall, let us talk about the functional review. Now, will the functional review also take into account the fiscal rules dictated by the Fiscal Responsibility Act? Now, when we're thinking about the functional review, I suspect we're also going to be considering what the wage bill looks like, but also what are the needs of the public service, as you articulated as well in that press conference, making sure that those personnel needs actually meet those particular demands. So let us talk about what the functional review would look like.
Okay, so for us, the functional review, as we said, is to give us that snapshot view of what the reality looks like. So we are, apart from just thinking about optimal size in terms of numbers, it's not necessarily just the number per se, but we are thinking about optimizing functionality of the public service. So the intent is for us to, first of all, determine every role that is being paid by the government of Grenada. So we want to determine, can we account for everybody that is being paid by the government of Grenada? Then we want to be able to determine, how are these jobs linked to the mandates of the ministries or the departments that they are functioning under? And then we can determine those that are linked, then yes, we can say you are actually contributing to the functionality of your department and your ministry. And then we can apply what we know to be some standard manpower ratios to give us a semblance as to what the ministry should look like. We cannot say 9,000, 6,000. Our focus mostly would be on the functionality. Are the people in the ministries able to contribute to the overall outcome of the ministry and the department? So this is really where our focus will be in terms of determining the optimal functionality of the public service. And hence we believe gathering the data, being able to do the analysis would help us to make that determination.
So previous studies or previous data would not account for what would be happening with this particular functional review.
We can use some of the information. That's what we say the desk reviews allow for us to pull some information some from here, some from there, but we cannot use it wholly and solely to determine what we want to determine at this time. Hence, we still need to go out to validate some of the information that we need.
Now, let us talk about the consultants or the consulting experts who would be assisting with the functional review. Has someone been identified? Has an agency been identified, or is that something that the DPA would be taking on their own?
We've gotten assistance from the Canadian government. In the advisor, Ms. Jennifer Crocker, worked with us to help with designing the tool and the analysis templates and so. So we are going to be getting the assistance from the technical people from Canada.
Yeah. Now, are there specific any urgent personnel appointments? Of course, we know that the healthcare system continues to bleed. For example, people like nurses, nurses have been expressing concern about their security of tenure within the service. Within that first phase, would you be considering those appointments in the context of what is urgently needed in the public service? How are we identifying the people who would be appointed in that first phase?
It clearly says persons who are acting, persons who are assignment, persons who are temporary and on probation.
Okay.
Mostly would be catered for in the first phase.
So it's not as if you're going to consider like specific urgent needs of any departments.
Well, I mean, nothing is set in stone, right? We are here to listen to the urgency, the importance, the priorities, and conversations are there to be had. And if we can determine certain things may need another way to review it, then why not? We can still have discussions. I mean, the framework is going to guide us in as far as possible so that we can know we are following a systematic path. But if there are certain things that we may need to consider outside, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, in respect of the unions, at the press conference, we did see representation from the Grenada Union of Teachers. But the Public Workers Union, they claimed that they could not send a representative because they were busy conducting union business at the time. But in respect of consulting with the Public Workers Union, most of the workers who are temporary are represented by the Public Workers Union. How do you intend to approach consulting with the union around this issue? Because their claim is, yes, they've had conversations with you, but the quality and depth of those conversations and consultations was lacking.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay. That is their position, yeah. But
no, I mean, that's okay, and we respect that. That's fine. Everybody's through their lens. Perspective is a powerful thing.
It sure is.
We've worked with a plan, and for us, the consultation period was April, I think, month of April, March, April, and we've scheduled the consultations, and we met with the different stakeholder groupings. And yes, we went with a frame, and we thought, usually to get the most out of a consultation, you need to start somewhere. And hence we decided to share with you what our thinking is so that we can hear from you what your thoughts are to inform going forward. So the consultation, yes, we shared where we were, but we were inviting your discussions. We took on board some of the things that you made mention of. And we always say in all of our consultations, we remain open. We are willing to hear from you. We know people would not have all the ideas sitting in a forum one time. So of course, if tomorrow, even while you're in the shower, something comes to you, feel free, pick up the phone, call us, let us know what's going on. I mean, look at how it is with the teachers. We met with them on a particular date as well. When things came to mind, they called, we need to discuss this. We had 3 different engagements with the teachers simply because things came to mind and they reach out and we engage them. And I mean, I think that is how it should be. For us, we remain open and we value the comments of all our public workers representatives, particularly the Public Workers Union, because of course they represent the majority of our workers. So we remain open. If there's something that the PWU feel there's need to discuss, the DPA doors is wide open. We've never, avoided added conversations.
Yeah. Now, you did mention that in phase 2 and phase 3, that there would be challenges some challenges in respect of the nuances that would come with those phases. Can you talk about why phase 2 and phase 3 might be much more, shall we say, complicated than phase 1?
I tend to believe it's because of the expectations of persons. Remember, we have a number of persons in the public service now who do not enjoy security of tenure, do not have access to a pension. And there may be persons who are nearing the age of retirement and they're going to be leaving the public service with nothing. So we can fully well understand the anxieties and the concerns. So I know these are things that we will need to open as wide as possible and all hands on deck to see what are the best options, what can we do to mitigate as far as possible some of the negative implications that may be, as a result of that. But what we're saying is that we are here to assist with providing the security of tenure that persons will prefer and enjoy, and supporting the implementation of the new pension program. So it's all about us working together to bring the improvement that is needed for our public officers. And to support what we do, we understand that productivity is a key thing. So hence we are also looking at the implementation of the integrated performance management system in the public service, because we certainly understand accountability is lacking. And if we don't put the necessary systems in place to support that sort of accountability levels, we are going to be spinning top in mud, as people would say. So we are doing that. We can.
I'm glad you mentioned performance in the public service. You also mentioned worker morale in the system as well, and because you indicated the optimism framework that you set up was really beautiful, I have to say. Were you a professor? were you an academician at some point? Because that presentation was really good. But let us talk about that, because that is a very important aspect of it in respect of customer service in the public service. Sometimes you go into a government ministry, and there might be a worker there who they're just unhappy with the world. Sorry to say, and so ensuring that you have that efficiency framework built in to regularization, I think it's such a critical step. Yes, because you also have to consider the wage bill of the state as well. Pension reform is another issue. So what would that look like? Ensuring that we have, of course, you mentioned that performance management, but improving customer service in the public service, improving how public servants present to the public. What would that look like? I mean, that probably might require a significant cultural shift as well.
Yeah, and we do know that cultural shifting is not an automatic thing, right? But we believe in consistency. And I think it can happen. What we intend to do is to build in some of the behaviors that we want to see exemplified through our employees, built into the performance management system, so that persons are quite aware of what the expectations are and they are being held accountable for delivering on those expectations. And we think once it is streamlined from the top all the way down to the bottom, holding each other accountable as we move through this cascading line, we would see the difference in persons' performances. So it's something that we're working on, and we're looking forward to sharing the integrated performance management system with everybody. So that I think all of us will welcome the intention for us to improve. And certainly that's what we want to do. We want to improve the operations of the public service. And we think it just cannot happen if we don't have the correct mechanism in place. And for us, the performance management system is critical to allowing for that to happen.
In terms of timelines, you established some very specific timelines in respect of how the phases will roll out. Would you be coming back to the public and letting us know, hey, you know, this particular timeline was not met, we might have to extend it? Or are you confident that the framework can be met within the timeline as you set?
I can say if there is changes, we would have to share it. But we are steadfastly working towards the timelines that we set because we understand the urgency for our employees. So we are going to do all in our power to stick within the time frame that we set. However, if for some reason, based on circumstances, things change, we are going to share that and share the reasons why. So all of us understand what is going on.
Absolutely. And we are going to get some questions from our viewers, and I'll bring back Mr. Joseph here as well. So perhaps he can also chime in on those questions. But Dr. Nigel Gravesandy is asking, as part of phase 2 and phase 3 of the reform process, will there be any attempt at assessing the structural adjustments that would need to be considered, as well as the capacity gaps that exist in the service and the structural training plan to address the existing gaps? Mr. Marshall, I believe you addressed those.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if there would be any other elements you might want to add. Let us get to another viewer comment. Sabrina Lane is saying, a good listener, someone who sees different perspectives and is not selfish in her ideas. I believe she's referring to you there, Mrs. Marshall. Now we have another viewer comment. How fair is it for the Imanis that will be regularized in 2025 when election is close? Of course, Mr. Camahan, I do not expect you, Mrs. Marshall, to address that. That's not her capacity. That's much more of a political question. But Mr. Joseph, I suppose we can direct this question to you. The viewer is saying that it looks like the Imani trainees would be the last group to come under the regularization framework. Do you believe that it was phased in such a way as to be political, in your view, Mr. Joseph?
Well, regularization is a political issue, and nothing would surprise me here, because the Imani expectations were very high that they will be made permanent. They'll be given a permanent position, and now they are told in the third phase that it will be looked at, which will be closer to the next election. So, you see, all these things that are pointed out by Ms. Marshall, when you read it on paper, it sounds real good, you know. We had studies, I told you, that was done that say how we will address productivity, performance management. But when you have a civil service culture that is against change, and you have rules there that protects you, once you're appointed by the Public Service Commission, you're appointed until you retire. Unless you change these rules, then you would not achieve what you're setting out on paper. Ms. Marshall could get a PhD for the paper that she write there, but in terms of practical implementation, from my experience, that will take a lot of training, cultural shifts, new attitude.
But Mr. Joseph, if I may, Mrs. Marshall just articulated the how and the what. In respect, there is a how, there is a methodology
And
for
I'm
achieving
telling you
that
that
cultural
was
shift.
always there, but I'm telling you the other reports pointed out the how, the what, the why, everything.
So
But
my
when it
question
comes
to
to
you,
implementation,
my question to you, therefore, is: would you say that it requires a specific leadership for that to happen?
yes, that's what I'm saying.
So why did it not happen under the previous administration? Because we're talking about leadership.
And all the other previous administration, because you inherit a system in which the rules appoint people for life. And it's not difficult to change that. You have to go through parliament, and then it becomes a political issue. There are issues you have to look at in the constitution and everything like that. We made incremental changes, very small changes are made. And if this government can make incremental changes, maybe the next one will have it easier. But the construct of the public service does not lend itself to implementing all these ideas that these consultants come up with and all the recommendations. And now the wage bill will increase, and the government is going to parliament on Tuesday to change the rule, the wage bill rule that set it at 9% of GDP from 2015 when we introduced it, to bring it up to 13% of GDP, spending more money on government wage bill from 9 to 13%. So it is a big challenge, and I think we perhaps need to understand that unless we have the type of leadership in the public service that will drive it, it will be very difficult to achieve. So if I did not have that experience, I would think reading the documents that's fine. I lovely, we could achieve this thing, but based on my experience, I'm not very hopeful.
Well, you're not striking an optimistic tone. I mean, you're not even striking a middle of the ground tone. You're just saying, this can happen.
No, I'm saying for it to happen, you need a change in lead. You need the attitude and the culture and the public service to change. I'm saying it has started in an incremental way. And we need to continue driving it so that we have a public service who is keen and understand that unless they improve the productivity, the country would not develop. You see, you have to get buy-in from the people unless you have buy-in. But I think that if the right approach is adopted, then yes, it will happen, but not in 3 years. I could tell you that. But incrementally, we can see some small changes that will lead us to a more effective public service.
And Mrs. Marshall, I want to respect your time, and we're also joined now by Dr. Gilchrist, because we'll be shifting the conversation a bit to minimum wage issues there. But Mrs. Marshall, you can go after this question because I want to respect your time. But let us talk about in respect of the functional review. I'm not too sure if you would be in a position to answer this, but what about in respect of the wage bill of the public service? Is that something that the DPA looks at? Do you also look at in the administration of the pension scheme of the public service? Is that something that you also consider as part of the functional review or no?
No, they are separate issues.
Okay.
DPA sits on the pension reform committee. So we are mindful of all the considerations while we do what we do, but they are not together. But
They're not together.
But we're happy that they are running together because at the end, when person's security of tenure is realized, then we're happy that they're going to get a bonus in terms of not just getting your security of tenure, but you're also going to be entitled, or well, not entitled, but the opportunity would be there for you to be part of a pension. So
Absolutely.
I think they nicely dovetail into each other.
Right. Because of course, pension reform is a debate that I'm sure, as a technocrat, you also observe what is happening there, right? And making those considerations. But is there anything, Mrs. Marshall, that I neglected to cover in this conversation that perhaps you might want to raise that we didn't raise before?
Well, for me, the critical thing is for us as public officers to be able to understand the intent of this exercise. And I always try to articulate the fact that the intention is to improve our public service. And to do that, we need to work together. So there must be some semblance of compromising, because we know we are at this point where there is no security of tenure, no pension, and we want to move to this point where we can afford to give persons the appointment letter. And that to me is heartening, because I feel it for persons who are not able to go to the bank to secure their mortgage, for example. I am going to feel very blessed when the majority, if not all, of our public officers will be in a position where they can do that. And added to that, where there would be the opportunity for them to enjoy something at the end of their contribution to the public service. So I'm just saying that we need to be mindful of all the things that are to be considered here, and we need to compromise. We just cannot have it all. So I want persons to manage the expectation in terms of what they really want from this exercise, and be mindful of what we can not comfortably, but what we can realistically offer all of us as public officers as we seek to improve not just the public service, but our nation.
Because notwithstanding, Mrs. Marshall, the government is the largest employer in the state of Grenada, but certainly the government cannot absorb every citizen. We have to be realistic about that. Now, in respect of, and that's just one final follow-up, the unions, how do you intend, what would be the consultative framework with the unions moving forward? What benchmarks are you setting going into those meetings?
So as we continue with the second, for the first phase, we remained open to the union to engage whenever time we can speak. But in terms of the second phase, as we go through the functional review, we do intend to have some discussion with the union so that they can understand the true picture, just as we are understanding it, because we seeking the information so that we can understand what's going on. We also want the union to understand what's going on. So we are going to engage with the union once we have a clear picture as to what the functional review, outlines for us, so that we can have that discussion as we move forward. But we remain open. I always say to the union, we are open and we are listening. We want to hear from you. The union and the government of Grenada has the same interest. Our interest is the improvement of our public officers. So we really should be working together because we have the same goal. We want to improve our public officers. So let's see what we can do together to ensure that we satisfy that goal. So, our doors are wide open, so we can have discussions with the union at any time, so that we can improve our public officer status.
Absolutely. Mrs. Marshall, thank you so very much for agreeing to appear on the Bub Report. We hope to have you back for subsequent conversations.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Mrs. Lindana Hilaire Marshall, she has a Herculean task before her right now in respect of working towards a regularization of temporary workers in the public service who are rated in different classes, who do perform different tasks. And that is a Herculean task in and of itself. It's an enviable position to be in. And so Godspeed to Mrs. Marshall and her team there at DPA. So we will take another quick break, folks, and we will come back with Mr. Gilchrist, Dr. Gilchrist, and Mr. Joseph, so that we can continue this conversation around regularization, as well as the proposed minimum wage that is to be implemented following consultations with the national community on what that minimum wage should look like. So please stand by. We will take a quick break and be right back after this.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't buy that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
And welcome back, viewers and listeners. We're now happy to be joined by Dr. Curlin Gilchrist. Dr. Gilchrist, I hope you prayed for me this morning in church. But it's so good to have you here, sir, again, joining your good friend, Mr. Joseph, as we continue this conversation. Now, Mr. Gilchrist, Dr. Gilchrist, you came in on the tail end of this conversation around regularization. But I want you to reflect on two schools of thought here. There is one school of thought as advanced by Mr. Joseph, in which Mr. Joseph is saying that government is now up against reality. In other words, the promises they made in respect of regularizing everyone in the public service is not going to be kept in this current construct. In fact, the Prime Minister in that press conference on regularization indicated that we will not be able to absorb everyone. Now, that's not what he said during the election campaign. He said it would be with the stroke of a pen. So that's one school of thought. Now, the other school of thought has to do with the stages of regularization and whether or not it can be accomplished within that framework. So I want you to reflect on your initial reactions to what the regularization process would look like against that backdrop.
Yes, and good morning, Kellen. Good morning to Mr. Joseph. Sir Joseph, you are looking well, man. That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful day. And I believe that God had blessed this country, so we just need to not waste it and not spoil it. Yes, but I do want to comment on that regularization. I'm close to it because, as you know, I'm also chairing the Pension Reform Committee. And so I'm working closely with the whole issue of regularization. It's one of the platform or the foundation upon which we are driving the pension reform. Mm-hmm. Yes, I know the statement was made. I think it's a goal that is set. I believe it will be achieved, but in a restructured way. Yes. So regularization would also be done in the context of the vision we want for the public service, and also relying on the information community, what I call the functional review. So yes, it may look as a Herculean task. It may look even impossible, but I believe the objective can be achieved once we take a realistic and pragmatic approach to the way we function in the public service, bearing in mind what the public service is intended to do, streamlining the public service, and then I think it is possible. Now, of course, most people believe that all who are there, you just simply make them permanent. It's not like that, because there are bodies there that may not fit into a what I call a more structured and permanent position. So these things are being looked at. There's a cleansing that is going on in that context, a cleaning up of the system, and what will remain, I believe, would be permanent, well established, public servants who can take that position, take their position in public service as a career. So we are looking to, that's the idea of the regularization, to create a public service where people can take jobs as a career and not in and out, in and out. So I believe it may look impossible, but is achievable in a lean sense. And I just want to make a quick comment. I heard Oliver making comment about the wage to GDP ratio, that 9% that will be shifted. That's okay, because I think simultaneously you would see the effort at productivity. You would see the effort of doing something about morale at the public service. You will see a greater effort at public performance management systems being made a reality. So there are a number of supplementary and complementary measures that we put in place to increase productivity. But I think it's great. If you are passing on wealth created to the people, there's nothing wrong with that. Do we want to see us paying 80 or 90% of our income and debt? Do we want that? Or we don't want to see a larger percentage of earnings going towards workers as a reward for the labor and for creating wealth in this country? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with increasing the wealth created and distributing that back to the people by the form of reward. All we have to ensure is that the GDP, the country grows, and growth is driven by labor. And I think we are in safe zone on that. So that's my comment on it. That's my comment.
Yeah, Mr. Joseph, there is nothing wrong. There is absolutely nothing wrong with making adjustments to the wage bill as we currently see it. Mr. Joseph?
My comment was not that there was something wrong with it. I said that the government is seeking to increase it.
Yes.
So when you're at 9%, right, you have more money because when you collect the total revenue, you have to allocate it to different areas. So it means that with 9% going to the wage bill, they have a remainder that will provide services, better services in healthcare, in agriculture, in various sectors. That was the point I'm making. The higher amount you pay on the wage bill, you will have less to do to provide for the other sectors. Remember, the budget has to do with allocation, how you allocate that limited resources, because you come with a budget. So you have your budget constraint, 1.3 billion, and you must allocate it to all the other areas in the public service. So if you choose as a government to move from 9 to 13%, and if instead of that you focus on growing the GDP, so if you have GDP growth, 9% of a higher GDP would be more money. So if the focus could be placed on growing the GDP, you will get more money as a percentage. So that is the point I was making. But the government,
I understand the point you were making then.
Yeah,
I understand the point. So it's 9% of the GDP and not 9% of recurrent revenue.
Right.
Right. It's 9% of GDP.
Yeah.
GDP. Yeah.
Now, let us talk about that proposed increase against the backdrop of the rules under the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Dr. Gilchrist, do you believe that at some point we may run into challenges there, or are we ensuring that we can maintain that particular benchmark that the Fiscal Responsibility Act requires us to do?
Yes, but of course you have to make adjustment to amend the Fiscal Responsibility Act to accommodate that. Now, yes, it is ambitious, but it's doable, right? Once there's a definitive, aggressive, and ambitious plan to grow the country and grow the economy, I think it is doable. But of course, you have to make adjustment to the overall fiscal regime, because remember, in doing all of that, you got to maintain fiscal discipline, and we have fiscal responsibility. So it's doable, but it has to be well managed, and there must be a concerted attempt to grow the economy in a way that all sectors will be driving that growth. So then it's doable. But I think you have to maintain, you have to make adjustment to the overall system, the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So it's doable, but it has to be managed, and it must be accompanied by a definitive and deliberate attempt to broaden the base of development, to broaden the base of growth, and then I have no issue with that.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back to the regularization, there was a comment that I missed here from Mr. Anthony Park. Mr. Anthony Park makes a very important point, and that is in the context of the Imani trainees, the Imani workers in the service. He's saying, isn't it that Imani is a training program? Help me to understand how Imani workers are being drafted into the public service. Gentlemen, your thoughts, Mr. Joseph, your thoughts on Mr. Park's comment there? Because they are part of the framework.
Yeah, that is why my earlier comment I was saying that so you have 3 phases as outlined by the DPA.
Yes.
And in the final phase, they will seek to make accommodation for the Imani. But that is not clear how it will be done.
Right.
You see, because what they were promised is that they will be brought in and made permanent. That is what they were promised. And now they are told, well, you will have to wait in phase 4, which is 2025, because phase 2 will be in 2024 and phase 3 in 2025 before you could know your fate. I don't know what will happen to them between now and 2025, what provisions will be made. And therefore, these are the questions that are still unclear and unanswered, and that these matters need to be dealt with forthrightly.
Mm-hmm. It's unclear and unanswered, Dr. Gilchrist. The Imani, the fate of the Imani employees.
Yes, well, at this point, what is being expressed is a general intention. I believe the details will be worked out. And of course, they are Imanis. They are being trained to be absorbed into the labor force. Mm-hmm. That whether or not we're speaking about just government or the broader private sector. So yes, it's not clearly defined as such in terms of a definitive approach, but I believe that one has to look at that when the time comes. And of course, the Imanis is a developing issue. Some Imanis would migrate out of the program by that time, would get substantive positions. Some of them would move on to further training in terms of acquiring skill set to fit into the emerging labor force. So I believe it is out of caution, right? One needs to take that approach, and I'm sure Oliver would agree on that. But as we get closer, as the time passes, a more definitive approach will be laid out in terms of how we treat the Imani, the pool of Imani that will be left. But so this is my initial comment on it. This is my initial comment on it.
How would you, if you were in a position to make a decision as an economist? We know that economics is about allocating scarce needs, but it's also about scarce resources, but it's also about managing those scarce resources. How would you advise the government to treat with that group of workers?
Okay, so the functional reviews will be taking place.
Yeah.
And therefore, as you embark on a functional review, the positions that are really needed for effective public service will emerge. And you match that against the skills that you have coming out of the Imani program. So there'll be some job matching and job, all right, fit for purpose going on. So it's important that the Imani program be skilled appropriately so that they can be absorbed into public service. And if they are not skilled appropriately, then they would not be able to absorb in the public service, but we have to find some other means of absorbing them. So in economics, of course, labor has to be allocated to areas where they are the most efficient and useful. And therefore, we have to prepare the monies to be absorbed into the public service. And at the same time, we have to restructure the public service in terms of its functional review to absorb the training money. So the two things go together. Of course, in economics, there would be fallouts, but I think the greater good will be served. So I'm not saying that, economically speaking, the way the market functions, that all would be absorbed. I'm not saying that. If you speak from an economic perspective, all would not be absorbed to fit into the public service. But there's a general intention that everybody would find some kind of permanent work, whether the public service or the private sector.
And let us now switch to minimum wage. Mr. Joseph, I would have you open bat on this conversation. React to the proposed minimum wage that will be enacted into law shortly. Do you feel as if it really meets the needs of the current Grenadian populace in respect of the cost of living challenges that we confront?
All right. First of all, let me say that the setting of minimum wage by the government in economics, it means that the government is intervening in the market. So when they had to cry that we stayed there 10 years and didn't do anything, the market regulated itself. So when you see bus drivers was one example, and the minimum wage that was set how much years ago at $35, that was not the current rate that we paid. They were paid $60. And they were paid $60 not by government intervention in the market. The market regulated itself. So I'm sure there are several areas where the committee perhaps found that the wage that was set 10 years ago is what is actually paid, and perhaps use that as a basis to suggest that we didn't do anything to address it, and that although you're talking about the poor and we did not, the market adjusted it. And that is what was found in the survey. And then for the other areas that the recommendation, the committee have to take into consideration two factors. One, the high unemployment situation, and two, whether or not by increasing it to a level where it may lead to unemployment, in the fact that if the minimum wage is set too high, then it would not attract additional people coming to work. In other words, employers taking on additional people. So we have to take that into consideration. But I think the minimum wage, setting it, and what had to be clearly understood, it's a flow. The minimum, you can't go under that, but you could pay above that. So you have to see the minimum wage as the government setting a flow, but you can pay any amount above that minimum, the bare minimum wage. So as I said, the government has intervened into the market, set the minimum wage, and in areas where there are increases because inflation over the years has eaten away from the value of the dollar, and therefore any adjustment that will strengthen the value or give you more from it is welcome.
Dr. Gilchrist, you have intervened around market forces here. Dr.
That's correct. That's correct. And Mr. Joseph would know that when we had a Great Recession, all right, the classical economist that was preaching the free market, all right, was not able to come up with solutions. And that's why you have Keynes and them coming out with a new economic thinking, where there's a role for government and there's a role for intervention. Because sometimes the market, and most times, many times, the market don't give a result or outcome that would benefit all. They are always falling from the market. Hence the need for government to intervene When a market don't give you the outcome that would benefit society. So yes, it's an intervention into the market, all right, to set a flow upon which the market has to follow. And that's being applied and that's good economic theory and economic thinking, to intervene when you take the welfare of all citizens into consideration. And that's the philosophical approach adopted by the government in addressing the issue of minimum wage. Because here the government is saying, look, we are interested in the well-being of everybody. We want to ensure that the income that you receive is such that you can attain or acquire the basic necessities of life. The issue of poverty. There's a genuine concern about people's well-being and the improvement in people's lives. And for you to attack that problem, you have to look at the wages paid for the use of your labor. And we have to intervene to set it at a level where it allows you at least to live to have a decent standard of living. So that's acceptable. If you follow the International Labour Organization, which is United Nations body responsible for advising countries, there is examples and examples of how you do these things. Yeah. So that's the philosophical position, right? Is to really help people to acquire and attain a certain standard of living by adjusting the minimum wage. There's another reason for it too. In the whole issue of protecting workers against employers who may be unjust. So there's another reason about protection. That is why it's in law. So it is illegal to pay a worker below the minimum wage prescribed for that occupation. It's illegal, it's punishable. There are fees, there are consequences. Yeah. So in approaching the minimum wage, we are very careful that we don't touch all occupation. There are certain categories that are in the law, and of course, my remit as head of the committee is to look at those categories. But in light of the evolving economic situation now, we have taken a holistic approach, and therefore you may find in our recommendation to the government for the consideration the inclusion of additional occupation. Yeah, that we
let us talk about those additional occupations, because you recently you just said that there's some areas you didn't touch. Why were they not touched? And the second part of the question is, what other occupations are you now considering to be put under that bracket?
Yeah. So our remit is to really to adjust the existing minimum wage order. That is our remit. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we looked at that, but I'm saying there are some occupations that warrant consideration. For example, sanitation workers. We're talking about the environment, and cleaners, street cleaners, and all these kind of occupation. We have started looking at those. We have had meetings with the sanitation workers, the contractors. We are meeting with the employers, and to see what wage is fair and just in the context of the viability of the authority that can be paid to workers. So this is a new area that we are contemplating, recommending to the government for inclusion in the minimum wage order. So sanitation is one of those. We also looked at the construction industry and trying to make a distinction between helpers and laborers. And we are mindful as we look at that echelon of the workforce where you hardly have union protection. Yeah. So who's going to stand up for these people? That's the role of the state. Who's going to stand up for the worker that is not unionized? There's nobody to fight for them. And you may have an employer that is profit seeking. Yeah. And of course, when you have to increase profit, what can be done in terms of your inputs and your costs into the operation of your business? So there's a role for government. So we have started looking at those areas. And I want to say to Mr. Joseph that any rate we recommend is a rate that would have been agreed in substance and with the employer. We are not going to propose a rate that would in a way affect the viability of the business. So where it might translate into jobs being lost and so. That's why we are having a consultation So workers may like a certain percentage. We meet with the employers. And I must say, all employers we have met with, and we continue to meet with employers. Even this week, we will meet with employers as we look at the occupation and how what we propose would affect them. And they give their views. We take that into consideration and make recommendations. So we are very conscious and careful that the rates that are recommended for consideration by the government does not in any way put the viability and the profitability of businesses at risk, and also any adverse effect on the on employment.
Absolutely, Mr. Joseph. The other issue that we want to tackle, and then we would close today's program, has to do with oil and gas prices. Now, in my review of the Brent crude market, and I'm going to share what I saw recently, and that was last night or the night before. But I'm going to quote from that article, and really that goes to oil and gas prices because those are about to spike again. Now, on Friday, our Daily FX, which is an energy and investment website, they said oil prices surged ahead of a ground offensive expected by Israel into northern Gaza. Earlier in the day, Israel issued a warning to residents in northern Gaza and the UN officials working in the area to evacuate within 24 hours. Now, the threat of the article goes on to say that the threat of sanctions would only exacerbate an already tight oil market unless progress around the Israeli-Saudi relations brokered by the US leads to an agreement from Saudi Arabia to raise its production to offset the lost Iranian supply. Another concern for the oil markets appear via the Strait of Hormuz, which accounts for about 20% of global oil supply. Any blockage of the main arterial route, for whatever reason, would strain global oil stocks, sending prices even higher, which threatens to reignite inflation concerns. Mr. Joseph, how should government treat with what might be an impending oil increase, given that the conflict in the Middle East and, of course, the backdrop of what continues to happen in Ukraine may continue to escalate further?
Well, as you know, we have imported inflation, and oil is one of the major factors. Increasing oil prices affect almost every sector. And therefore, the government will have to make a determination on its taxes, one, because on oil, we have taxes that are levied on it. The government can intervene and adjust as they see necessary. For example, if at the pump, the gas reach a certain limit, I think the government has said they would not allow it to go above $17. We had the cap at 15, the cap was removed, it went down, now it is almost at 17, 16.88, and the government said it will intervene at 17. If oil price, it depends on the percentage hike. So if it goes up by quite a lot, it means that if you're going to cap it at 17, you'll have to give up more. Because you see, when you make this statement, at the time you speak it, oil price might be at one level, and look, you have a crisis there, and it might be double.
Extremely volatile. Yeah.
Yes, very volatile. Yeah. So the government will have to see how it will respond.
Yeah, because in the last election, oil and gas prices were a major talking point, so much so that when the government, the NDC administration won the election, Deacon Mitchell at the time, the Honorable Deacon Mitchell, who was the finance minister, put a cap. Mr. Gilchrist, would we be expecting another cap again?
Well,
is that what you would propose?
Yes, you should be expecting another cap. Because of course, otherwise correct. Most of the inflation that we import, when you look at inflation as calculated, you can attribute prices to oil and petroleum products as a contributing factor. So that's correct, and it affects all sectors of the economy. So of course, serious consideration would have to be given to putting a cap very, very, very soon. But simultaneously, we have to make a decision as to, in terms of our priority with respect to consumption. and the use of oil. With respect, I'm speaking about vehicles that we import and other uses of oil. So we have to look at that. It's not just capping the price, but also we have to speak more to conservation and trying to minimize our heavy dependence on oil. And we have to simultaneously look at alternative to oil and petroleum. So I'm saying it's a broader picture that forces us to look at, because that situation in the Middle East would have serious implication for oil and oil production and oil prices.
What role do you think, and I'm going to bring in Mr. Joseph on this, what role do you think Guyana should be playing now that we have Guyana getting into the oil game? Some estimates suggest that they are now they have the fourth largest oil reserves in the world, competing with neighboring Venezuela. When Hugo Chavez was president of Venezuela, and before Venezuela was illegally sanctioned, I call it an illegal and unethical sanction by the global north, by the United States, we had a very good Petro-Caribe agreement with Venezuela that supplied oil and gas to Grenada at reasonable prices. Should we be thinking about entering into such an arrangement with our CARICOM neighbor? Venezuela was not a CARICOM neighbor, at least, certainly, but Guyana is a CARICOM neighbor. Is that something that we should be really looking into?
Well, we should look at all possibilities that will reduce the price of oil. But let me say, in Guyana case is different. ExxonMobil are the one doing the drilling. They perhaps have deals few years tie up with already with suppliers, with importers of the oil, maybe over a long term, to buy up all the oil. These are not just simple. Oil is not just a simple commodity that is just traded on the world market. So if they already sold the oil as futures, then it will be difficult to see how the Guyana government could come and say, all right, well, we will offer you lower prices for the oil.
Right.
Bearing in mind, it's a private company, ExxonMobil, that is doing the drilling, and they perhaps have contracts already tied up. But anyway, we could talk to Venezuela. Why you dismiss Venezuela? We could continue talking to Venezuela to see.
This is true. Well, this is true. This is true. But this is true. But Venezuela is currently under sanction.
Yeah, no. What I'm saying is, yes, but they have been able to sell some oil. So we got to go back to the drawing board, yes, with Venezuela and talk to Guyana. Let's see what are the possibilities. Anything that we could do to get oil cheaper would be great for benefit the whole of Grenada, and I'm all in for that.
Yes, I want to jump in here.
Go ahead, Dr. Gilchrist. Yes,
I want to jump in here just to follow what Oliver is saying. So he's on the right trend that talk, and yes, we have to speak to everybody. But I also believe that notwithstanding the nature of the industry and how it operates through futures contract and so on, no contract is cast in stone. So we still have to have the dialogue with Guyana and Venezuela. Whatever we have to do to see if we can come up with an arrangement that would translate into helping us cushion that increase in petroleum products, in the prices of petroleum products. We should pursue it. So notwithstanding contracts signed and the nature of the industry in a way in the futures market, we still have to confront it and speak to them. Nothing is cast in stone, right? Nothing is cast in stone. So we cannot sit back. We have to find a way to have an arrangement where we can cushion, because our economy is very open. It's very, very open. We depend on oil to fuel our industries and our sectors. So we have to carry on the conversation and explore as far as possible any arrangement that would bring benefit to our people. Simultaneously, we have to start looking at alternative energy, all right, solar and other ways of compensating for our heavy reliance on petroleum and petroleum products. So the conversation on alternatives energy, non-renewable energy has to continue. It has to take momentum.
Absolutely. Mr. Joseph and Dr. Gilchrist, thank you for appearing on the program this week. I'm going to offer you gentlemen an opportunity for some closing comments, starting with you, Mr. Joseph.
Well, I thank you. I think it's the program is very useful. We have brought out some very interesting issues that have been discussed to give the public different perspectives. It's good to have different views and issues. I think it benefit both sides, you know. And so this opportunity to share in your program, and I would hope that the current situation in the Middle East is brought under control as soon as possible, so that we do not get that effect of the global oil prices, and that we have it under control.
Yep, absolutely. Dr. Gilchrist?
Yeah, thank you very much. And let me limit my final comments to the minimum wage. This week, we continue the conversation. If any business want to talk about it, they can give the Ministry of Labor a call, and just, you know, and we'll be there to discuss how the proposed minimum wage would affect your business and to see what compromise we can arrive at. We're looking at wages that businesses are comfortable with. At the same time, would bring some additional benefit to the wage owner, and in a sense, raise the bar in terms of our economy and spending in our economy. Hopefully, it's one of the methods we are using and one of the approaches the government is using to address poverty. The pension is one, but addressing the minimum wage is also a complementary approach to the whole issue of raising living standards in Grenada, Carriacou, and Pete and Martinique. So the door is open still this week. Any business, please call the Ministry of Labor and ask for a meeting. We will be there to discuss it with you and to arrive at a compromise.
Dr. Gilchrist, Mr. Joseph, thank you so very much. Mr. Joseph, you always make yourself available. I wish I could say the same for your boss, Dr. Mitchell, but tell him the avenue is always open for him to appear on the program. All right, viewers and listeners, this was the Bub Report. On behalf of the producers of the program, I'm your humble servant, Dr. Kellen Bub, wishing everyone a safe and productive week. As a programming note, we intend to have some special programs in the lead up to the 40th anniversary of the October 19th, 1983 tragedy in Grenada. So please look out for some interesting programming coming from us as we commemorate and observe this very significant and tragic period in Grenada's post-independence history. Wishing everyone a pleasant week. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome to this.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just keep quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.